The dark cosmos. Stay cosmic.
Part 1. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you somehow survived getting engulfed by a black hole? I certainly have, and like everyone else, I could never come up with a concrete answer. Black holes are kinda scary when you think about them. Their gravitational pull is so strong that light itself cannot escape its grasp. They are so destructive and space warping, and the thing that makes it scary is that we truly know nothing about them. All we really have is our observations and theories. As far as observations go, we finally managed to get a publishable photo of said black hole released earlier this year on April 10th, 2019. In the photo, you can see the photon capture zone of the event horizon, which is basically the visible range of gravitational manipulation towards a black hole. Before I go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Carter Lux. It's ironic that my last name is Lux because once I tell you what I know, you will realize just how unlucky I really am. I'm 21 and work as a longshoreman. It's a job where you work at a harbor where you import and export shipping freight. You would know what I'm talking about if you live near a city or by the ocean. The area with all the cranes and containers, that's where I work. This is why a lot of people would consider me lucky, I guess, being so young and getting a hard-to-obtain job like that. It's only possible because I come from a line of longshoremen, so I kinda just instantly got the job. It's just how the world works sometimes. I'm just happy I was on the positive side of it for a change, and I try to be as humble as I can about it. I was just a normal young adult like everyone else, just without the worry about finding a successful job. I just had to worry about keeping it. I might have inherited the job, but now it's up to me to maintain it. Or they will find no problem firing me for someone more experienced to step in. Like most young adults, I try to relax a little from time to time with doing activities like hiking, going to bars, or mainly smoking marijuana with some good friends of mine, Johnny, Derek, and James. They were friends of mine since elementary school, and we have been basically inseparable ever since we started hanging out at recess. Let me get back to the main story now that I have given you a little background. I'm sure you all are here for the interesting parts, not my life story. I still need to explain this for everything to make sense. First off, I do not want to come off as the one with the answers. As I just explained, I was a normal person, just like everyone else. I never worked at NASA or SpaceX. I never really held much of an interest for sciences in that particular field anyways. To be even more honest, I never really cared about space or things that people think about in a scientific way in general. I would go for a more philosophical approach to things. If you couldn't already tell, I was a typical curious stoner whenever I wasn't on the job, just smoking away and wondering about the universe spiritually. Casually discussing theories with my friends while we were hotboxing my car was a usual thing we would do after our work shifts. One particular time, we got into a deep conversation about the universe. It started with Derek taking a bong rip, exhaling slowly and saying, "Yo, what if some scientist made a black hole by accident and destroyed everything?" I turned over, stoned out of my mind, and said, "I guess we would be destroyed then." Derek's what-ifs were always the ones that were more like a bad scenario than an actual what-if, leaving virtually no other option than what he said as the answer. "What about you, Johnny?" Derek looked over to the back seat. Johnny was passed out. I don't blame him. This shit was some of the most potent marijuana we have smoked in a while. The two main reasons why it was so potent were that due to my newly inherited job, I was able to get one of the most expensive eighths of bud at a brand new marijuana store that opened nearby. And two, we all took a 1-week tea break. A tea break is when you stop smoking weed for a certain amount of time and bring down your tolerance so you can get higher and smoke less. And let me tell you, it felt like it was our first time again. "James," said Derek, not wanting to bother with waking Johnny up. James looked over to Derek and I, looking seemingly more sober than the rest of us. I have a feeling he cheated a little on the tea break. "Well, it depends what's on the other side," James said, packing a bong rip. Fucking James, why'd you have to open up that fucking can of worms? I was intrigued the moment I heard James say those words. Now that's a response I wasn't expecting. James was always the one to say something eye-opening or mind-blowing. "Yeah, James, what do you mean it depends on what's on the other side?" Derek said with interest. We both looked at James as he pondered this question. He held up a finger for us to wait as he was in the middle of smoking his bowl. After a couple of coughs, he said, "Well, what do you guys think is on the other side of one?" Usually I'd get ticked off and make him answer the question, but the way he said it, and the high I was feeling, made me want to play along. "Well, I think it's probably a huge ball of light and energy made up of all the stuff that gets sucked into it." James nodded and looked over at Derek. I don't know, bro. Nothing, I guess. Because black holes just suck everything up and put it into some void inside it." James' look got slightly more intense toward Derek and said, "Well, isn't space itself just a huge void?" Derek and I just sat there looking at him. James did have a good point. I started to pack myself another bowl as I could feel my high starting to wear off. And this was a very interesting conversation I wanted to stay high for. After I smoked the bowl, I spoke. "So what do you mean, James? You're saying that inside of a black hole is a void?" James laughed. "Close. I think that the other side of a black hole would be another dimension or realm, you know? Like a different reality or something." James really did know how to blow our minds. I don't know if it was the weed or not, but what James was saying sounded pretty plausible in the moment. "Damn, James, I didn't really think of it like that. It's like an inaccessible wormhole or something," I said, my mind wandering around my thoughts. James looked impressed at my similar thinking. "I think of it more as a one-way track to a different place." "That is a good way to look at it," I said, taking in a breath of the hot box. It was so smoky it was almost hard to see each other at this point. James was looking out the window thoughtfully. "I wonder if we will have the power or know-how to use black holes one day. Or at least understand more about it so I can really know if I am right or wrong." I looked at James. "Yeah, but I guess that's one of those questions we will probably never get an answer to." James stayed silent, but gave a slight nod, still looking thoughtful. This was 1 year ago. About 1 month after we had this conversation, James called Derek, Johnny, and I, and told us to meet up at our usual smoke spot. This would have been normal if James didn't go missing after the black hole conversation we had. All three of us obviously agreed and went to the place to meet up. James must have been in some big trouble to up and leave like that, and then hit us back up a month later. Once we got to the spot, we saw James sitting there on the hood of his car waving us over. We sprinted over to James, who had a weird smirk on his face. A smirk. I wanted to slap the smug look off his face for making this situation and looking like it's a joke to him. Instead, I just yelled at him, "James, what the fuck, man? Where the fuck have you been? Everybody has been searching for you." Derek got into James's face, his head turning a slight shade of red while trembling, and said, "I should fuck you up right now, man. You just disappear and come back with a smile on your face like nothing's wrong. You do realize we were the last ones to see you, right?" James's smirk faltered a little as he looked at Derek. And? Derek slapped James's head while Johnny pulled him back. "You have no idea how it is to be worried for your friend while everyone else around you thinks you're the one involved with their very disappearance," Derek screamed, still being held back by Johnny. "All right, Derek, calm down. Let's let him explain himself before we do anything rash," said Johnny, pushing him back and giving him a stern look. Derek backed off, but was still pissed. Johnny might have been quiet, but when needed, he flies into action. He was also easily the strongest member of our group, so none of us wanted to fight him anyways. He looked like he was supposed to be a jock, but said, "Nah, I like weed more instead." Luckily, he was also one of the nicest people you can meet unless you get on his bad side. "All right, fine. Let's hear it then, James. What was so important that you had to make us go through hell for a month?" James looked at us all and said, "I think I have the answer to that one question." This made us all silent for a second. I leaned forward and grabbed James's shirt and said, "Are you trying to tell me that you went missing all because of some stupid conversation we had last month?" My anger boiling to the tipping point. Johnny didn't try to stop me as James's response angered him as well. "You better tell me something real convincing right now before I punch you in the face and drag you back to your family who's currently devastated over you being missing right now." Not fazed at all, James looked at us and said, "It's easier if it tells you itself." Before I had the chance to think about what he said, everything around me turned blood red and all noise ceased. I saw Johnny and Derek both collectively freak out like me, but I couldn't hear a word they were saying. James looked like this had happened before and was used to this abnormal view of the world. The color of Derek and Johnny came back and I could finally hear them as well. James was looking straight at me. The more I looked, I realized he was looking past me, not at me. When I turned around, I didn't know what was real anymore. I looked up and my mind started to slowly break, trying to understand what I was trying to focus on. The being had this type of Vantablack center and emitted an aura that made me feel numb. Vantablack is a black so dark that it almost seems like a void, darker than the shadows itself. This thing that was lurking behind me was easily 7 feet tall, and every time I tried to focus on what I assumed was its face, my mind would start to slip. It was the closest I've ever felt to losing my sanity. I don't understand why this thing provoked so much fear into my soul. It just seemed like a shadow, but every particle in my body screamed that it shouldn't exist. Just looking in its general direction brought up a primal urge to survive, but somehow I knew better not to try and run from this being. If its mere presence changes the fabric of reality around us, I don't want to know what it would do if I tried anything. What has James gotten us into now? Part 2. Sorry for the delay. I needed to rest after that last post. I was going to try and describe the being that we encountered, but thinking too much on its form almost made me lose myself once again. Consider it a side effect from being around the thing. From this point on, I will refer to this being as the Shadow. Now back to the encounter. I tried to rationalize what was happening around me, hoping that I didn't just go insane. I tried to move, but I couldn't move a muscle. I could only move my head around, and when I tried to shout, I realized I couldn't speak either, as air slipped out of my lips instead of words and screams. Derek, Johnny, and I were all forced to our knees and pulled next to each other in a line by the invisible force while James walked over to the Shadow's side, looking at us with dead eyes. There was no sparkle in his eye, just an empty, dull darkness. The thing floated over to us, and the closer it got, the hotter and heavier everything felt. I almost thought I was going to be burned from how much heat was being emitted from it. Once it was about 3 feet away from us, a thunderous, deep voice that was so loud it instantly gave me a piercing headache boomed inside of my head. I could tell it affected the others the same way, because I could see the tears and pain in their faces as they clenched their jaw muscles while squeezing their eyes shut. "You all wish to unlock the secret of the black hole. Some will. Some will not. Some already know. James looked up at the shadow from this remark, seemingly unaffected by the heat and pressure, and then knelt down just like us. Some need to earn it. Some do not. The shadow put an arm out, strange wisps of dark energy flowing off of the arm like smoke, and put its hand on James's head. You have earned it. What happened next was something I will never be able to get out of my head until I die. The area around James burst into this indigo blue flame-like energy and started to consume him. I watched as James started hollering in a way that I wish I could erase from my brain. His skin melted off like wax, and by the time it got to the bones, Johnny retched in disgust. It didn't stop there. By the time James was just a kneeling skeleton and it seemed like everything was melted away from his body, the bones thickened and started to turn jet black. Long black hair started to jut out of his skull, anime style. The hair reminded me of Madara Uchiha from Naruto if he got reanimated without skin. I would have usually thought it was cool, but in this case, it was one of the most terrifying things I've ever witnessed. Somehow he was still screaming, and I listened to his voice turn demonic and guttural, while his form started to vibrate slightly. The sockets of James's eyes, which were melted away almost instantly from the burst of energy, started to glow a deep crimson red, while he started to turn his screams into fits of mad laughter. I understand. I understand it all! James screamed while seemingly increasing in height. By this point, he was standing next to the shadow again, two ram-like horns poking out of his skull and some type of reddish, smoky substance covering his body like a robe. The thing that was once my friend looked over at us and said with a booming voice, "You are all insignificant pawns in the great game of gods. I know. We have everything, but nothing. We will win and lose. Nobody truly understands." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My old friend lowered down to this knowledge-seeking monster. How could this even happen in the first place? All we did was smoke weed and talk about the universe, which is pretty much what 9 out of 10 stoners usually do when they are high, so I just didn't get it. There must have been something that happened to James before we hung out for that last time. As I was thinking about how this came to be, I heard Derek spit out something that would have made me slap him if I wasn't paralyzed. "Since you're God and you know everything, then tell us what you know then. What happens after we die? And what was I before I was born? Oh yeah, and what's on the other side of a black hole?" I wanted to know the answers to these questions too, but from what I just witnessed, I don't think the answers are comprehensible for the normal human mind, and I would have never asked them in the way that he had if this thing really was God, or something close to it. Realizing that we can speak now, I looked over at Derek and said, "Are you fucking kidding me, bro? This is not the time for this right now." Derek was about to reply when the shadow talked over him. "Derek, the messenger. I am not God, but I will give you the answers you seek." The shadow pointed at Derek, and within seconds, I started to see tears flow down his face. "Oh, I see." I couldn't tell what Derek was feeling. He seemed sad, but happy at the same time. "I see," Derek said again, tears still flowing down his cheeks. He got calm and became distant, as if none of us were here, and seemed like he was in a type of meditation state. Johnny and I both tried calling his name, but he was ignoring us or not hearing us at all. The shadow looked over at Johnny. Its voice sounded slightly inquisitive as it said, "Johnny, The wild card. Your destiny is not set. Johnny looked confused. Wild card? The shadow then looked over to me. Carter, the righteous one. Your destiny is... I was so lost and confused, I just stayed silent, scared to say something wrong. Now fulfill your destiny. Play your part. The shadow looked over to what used to be James. Come, prophet. We have universes to explore. And with that, a white flash blinded me, and by the time I opened my eyes, I found Derek still on his knees in an unresponsive state. And everyone else was gone. James, Johnny, and the shadow were nowhere to be seen. I pulled out my phone to find out that only 1 minute had passed since we came here to meet up with James. I don't fully understand what happened to me or the others, but I damn sure am gonna try and figure it out. I guess I'll start with going to James's place. There has to be a clue or something to alleviate my head. Part 3. Hello, people of Reddit. First off, I wanted to say thank you for reading my experience and supplying theories of your own about the situation. They are all very intriguing, and the more I hear, the more determined and confident I feel to solve this thing. Maybe that's the destiny the shadow was referring to. Maybe I am destined to solve the mystery of the black hole. I don't know. I mean, seriously, I'm just a stoner, so I really don't understand how I can be the righteous one. Is solving this simple but complicated question righteous? I'm sorry for rambling. I'm just trying to clear my head a little from all of this crazy shit. Anyways, once I was able to recover from the encounter, I tried to get Derek to his feet, with no luck. I had no choice but to call his parents, who started to chew me out the moment they saw their son. I couldn't just leave him there like that, so I had to take a little heat from his parents. I obviously couldn't say what happened because they would have had me in an asylum in a heartbeat, so I came up with a story that he took some acid from a shady dealer and he had a bad trip. They proceeded to chew me out some more and even threatened to call the police on me, but Derek's dad started to de-escalate the situation, to my surprise. He looked at his son and said, "Look, Carter, as much as I want to punch you in the face while sending you and myself to jail, ultimately, this was Derek's choice." Derek's mom started to protest, but the dad held up a finger. "Honey, I know you're pissed. So am I. But we can't take out our anger on this kid because our son made the wrong choice. Teenagers are naturally irresponsible." Derek's mom was still obviously pissed, but she respected her husband's words. She sighed and slightly nodded, avoiding eye contact with me. Derek's dad then looked me in the eyes intensely and said, "Don't think this means you're off the hook, Carter. If my son isn't normal by morning, you'll wish I punched you. You better hope it's just a bad trip. He was your friend, Carter. You should have at least tried to stop him from taking it. I'm disappointed in you." Even though it was Derek's dad, it still hit hard. Heck, both of Derek's parents were like my own at times. I spent many days of my childhood over at Derek's house. Having sleepovers and eating dinner with them was a normal thing. In a way, I looked up to Derek's parents like an aunt and uncle, like family. So hearing those words hurt, knowing what really happened. I guess I have to sacrifice a little bit of my reputation for now until I can find some hard evidence to explain myself with. Lying wasn't the way I wanted to go, but I didn't see another way out of it. I tried to apologize, but they just walked away. The dad picking up Derek and presumably taking him to the hospital. I have to put my feelings aside for now if I really want to save my friends. I need to figure out what and why this happened to James and how it involved Derek, Johnny, and I. Speaking of Johnny, I don't even know if he's alive. He was gone after the flash, and I highly doubt that anyone was going to go looking for him. Before you think I'm an ass, let me explain myself. Johnny has always been an enigma of our group. None of us has ever seen any of his family before, and we have learned over the years not to ask him about it. We started to assume he was adopted because, since as far back as I remember, I've never seen his family or guardians before. He would always have the freedom to go out and do whatever, and he never seemed to have a curfew. It wasn't as bad as it sounds, though. He wasn't the only kid with loose parents. As for his parents, all that meant to us is that was one less set of parents to worry about. Johnny always said that we were his family to him. I have to find him. I can't just lose all my childhood friends like that. I made my way to James's house once I knew Derek's parents were gone. I pulled up to his small, one-story house that was in a secluded neighborhood at the end of a cul-de-sac. I was saddened to see our ultimate man cave looking so dilapidated and sketchy looking. The sketchiness was enhanced with the slowly darkening evening sky. It hasn't even been half a year yet, and it looked abandoned already. Police tape condemning the house. They stopped looking for clues after a damn week into James's disappearance. I never had any hope in my local PD anyways. From the beginning, they just wanted to write it off as a runaway, and it was James's family who kept pressing the issue. I started to look around the house for an entry point once I knew I wasn't going to be spotted. The front of the house was a no-go, so I made my way to the back, climbing over a 6-foot chain-link fence and almost rolling my ankle on the landing. After another thorough scan for entry, I finally found a loose window that gave way after a few tugs and one quick upwards thrust. I crawled inside and cursed my clumsiness once again as I lost my footing, trying to reach into the pitch-black room. Something broke from the weight of my foot and I flew into the room, hitting my head on something hard. Once I was able to stand up, I fished out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I know I should have done that earlier, but sometimes I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, and I was trying to be discreet outside. Once the light illuminated the room, I instantly figured out how I fell. I ended up breaking into the bathroom and I broke the towel rack by putting my foot on it for support and smacked my head on the side of the toilet on the way down. I'm just happy I didn't crack my head open. Not really knowing what to look for, I walked out of the bathroom and through the living room while lightly rubbing the now slowly developing bump on my head. Damn, these cops just trashed James's place looking for clues. And it seemed like they had a little fun doing so because it looked like a raid rather than an investigation. I walked over smashed plates and broken chairs and made my way to James's room. It was messy, but not as bad as the rest of the house at least. Either the cops were sloppy or we were extra cunning because in less than 1 minute I was sitting there with our community stash of weed, our hidden bong, danky, and a Bic lighter I still had in my pocket. Yes, we named our bong Danky, and yes, this is the time for a bong rip. I know you probably think I'm stupid, but honestly, fuck it. De-stress now and yell at me later. I need THC to calm my nerves right now. And I was lucky enough to remember about the stash. After I took about 3 rips, I was high and went to put all the paraphernalia away when I noticed a small shape in the corner of the stash spot. I reached in and pulled out a small black leather-bound journal. Now this is what I was looking for. I opened up the journal and looked at the first few pages, and they were covered in nothing but swirls and black circles and scribbles. I kept paging through until I noticed the pages becoming legible for once. The page I read went like this. Messier and messier this gets the more I try to understand. Look to the skies and open your eyes! Why did I have to be the only one to see it? If you're a Virgo, you might understand. Astrological to astronomical. Trillions of stars can make infinite constellations. Infinite like a figure 8. Over and over again, and it never, ever ends. Where is hell And where is heaven? For in space there is no descent or ascension. I might be onto something. I need my lucky number 7. We aren't alone on this floating rock. I will prove everyone wrong. The next page was a sketch of the shadow that was so detailed it gave me a headache. I was about to read the next page when I heard a sound from outside towards the open window. I put the journal in my pants, scared to lose the only evidence I have by simply having it fall out of my pocket, and tried to sneak out a different way. There was no way to really move around without making some type of noise. I really didn't want to explain myself if it was a cop or one of James's parents. The decision got made for me, to my horror, as I heard a voice call out to me, "Carter Lux!" How this random person knew my name, I wish I knew. I just stayed silent and hoped the guy might just leave. Another stupid thought for me, I know. A female voice called out this time. "Carter, come out. We need to leave now before the police come. This is your only chance we are giving you." This was starting to sound like a horror movie unfolding in real life. First supernatural beings and now all-knowing people. "Why should I trust you?" I said to the two unknown voices. I heard a small laugh and then heard, "Because we knew you were here this whole time and decided to let our presence be known. And I just tipped you off that the police are on their way to this location as we speak." The lady did have a point. "All right, I'm walking out. But then you both need to start explaining what the fuck is going on. Deal?" "That's why we're here, buddy," the male voice said in a smug tone. I made my way to the window to see two figures in identical black and white suits staring back at me. Sunglasses on even though it was nighttime by this point. Fuck. I really don't have another choice but to go along with them right now. The next time I get another chance to post, I will let you guys know how this goes. Wish me luck, guys, and thank you for your support. Part 4. Let me tell you, I've had one of the most intense nights of my life, and I already know this is just the beginning. I feel like I should start off by saying that I think Derek is a lost cause. Before I can explain how I came to that conclusion, I need to explain what happened to myself first. I crawled out of the window and was about to attempt to climb the fence I entered from when the suited man stopped me and pointed over at the other side of the backyard. "Go over the brick wall and await for retrieval," the woman said, sounding slightly like Siri. I ran to the other end of the yard and hopped the wall, just to see the suited man standing there waiting for me. "What the fuck? You were just over there," I said, pointing at James's house. "Well, now I'm over here, champ." This was unreal. I must have been higher than I thought. "Did you just teleport?" The man slightly smirked at me. "Ran over here just like you." He said it like it was normal. I didn't even see or hear this guy approach at all. "We can chat later. Get in." I swung around, startled from the voice that came from behind me. I turned to see the lady sitting there in a black, unmarked car that resembled the BMW with the window down. "How the fuck did you do that?" The man answered for her. "Simple. We're quick and quiet. Need to be in our line of work." It still didn't explain how a lady in a suit snuck up on me with a car in a ratty alleyway. Dude, I can barely believe quick and quiet for you, let alone her sneaking up on me with a literal car! That's a lot more than just quick and quiet. That's like some superpower ninja shit. The woman spoke up. "They're almost here, get in." I obliged and hopped into the back seat. The man was already sitting in the passenger seat with the seatbelt on somehow. I decided to stop questioning the fact that he was too fast for me to register because it seemed like I was gonna have to end up getting used to it. The car sped off, and not long after, I saw a bunch of cop cars fly by towards James's house. I was weirded out by the fact that none of the cops noticed us speeding by. They didn't even look in our direction, as if we were never there to begin with. "All right. Who the fuck are you people?" I said, wanting to get some type of answer. They both simultaneously looked over at me and said, "John and Jane Doe." Ugh, the more time I spend with these people, the creepier they get. They knew more than they should. They were faster and quieter than reason. They were in identical pristine suits and sunglasses regardless of the lighting. It felt like they were cheesy secret agent cartoons that hopped straight out of a comic book. Worst of all, they were both paying zero attention to the road as they were both facing me, but somehow we never crashed. John and Jane Doe? Seriously? If you two are gonna lie to me, at least be more original, I said, annoyed that they thought I wouldn't notice such a default name like that. Simultaneously, again, they said, "Well, that's the name." They were still paying zero attention to the road, but the car seemingly drove itself. John Doe tilted his head slightly. "Believe it or not, kid, I don't care. Never been called anything different." "All right, John and Jane Doe. What is going on here?" I said to them, needing some type of relief from all of this confusing shit. After an extremely awkward pause of silence, Jane spoke up. "There have been disturbances in this area. We detected extreme amounts of energy bursts around here, and there are a lot of red flags that point to the fact that entry was made into our reality. Multiple times." John Doe started talking next. "Your pal James has been meddling with things that should have never been disturbed. After we detected the first entry, we have been keeping this area under tabs. Confirmed entry was logged for tonight. You were affected by the anomaly. So were your friends. We need to gather everyone who made contact, Carter. This is very serious. Do you know where your friends are? And what do you remember from your encounter?" I explained to them what happened to my friends and I, and they listened silently. I never mentioned the journal as they never mentioned it, and I still didn't fully trust them. I heard a hint of intrigue in John's next words. "You never asked it a question?" "No, why?" He avoided my question and continued. "We need to get to Derek now. Those types of questions aren't meant to be asked." "Derek's probably at the hospital. He's in bad shape right now." The next moment, we were in front of the hospital. I didn't understand it, but whatever. It seems like there are going to be a lot of things that are going to make me question reality. We made our way into the lobby, and after John and Jane exchanged a few words with the head nurse, we were given the info to Derek's room. He was located in the psych ward for his condition. We quickly went to the room number and walked in. This is where things turned from confusing to horrifying. "Not good," John said, the first hints of fear I've heard from either one of them. The room was a bloodbath. Instead of Derek, there was a dead doctor lying in a pool of blood, eyes gouged out, and the body riddled with slices and stabs from what I assumed was a scalpel. The man's face was stuck in a horrible grimace, alluding to the fact that he was probably alive when his eyes were removed. There was a message that said, "I see. Can you?" scrawled out in the doctor's blood. I looked over to a chair that was in the middle of the room. The chair had leather restraint straps that were ripped. Jesus, was Derek really capable of doing this? Jane grabbed my shoulder, snapping me out of my thoughts. "We need to find Derek and contain him before this gets any worse." We ran out of the hospital to find out Derek had killed another nurse during his escape. Same MO. Gouged out eyes with the same message written in the victim's blood. I told them Derek was probably on his way back home, and we seemingly teleported over there with the car once again. The front door was already cracked open on our arrival. We slowly made our way into Derek's house, and it seemed normal enough so far. I called out Derek's name a couple of times with no answer. I was already preparing myself for the worst as we made our way through the house and checked the rooms. My worries were confirmed when I found Derek's parents in their bed, slaughtered. Derek's dad was almost unrecognizable from whatever mutilation Derek inflicted on him. There was blood dripping down the walls on his side of the bed from how extra vicious his demise was. Throat ripped out, and heart removed to my later horror when John and Jane informed me. I was staring at the scene in shock. I looked over to Derek's mom, and the damage to her wasn't nearly as bad. It seemed like she bled out from the eye gouging. I started to cry, and my knees buckled and gave in. I was crying at the end of the bed, and for once, John and Jane didn't try to rush me. I took a couple more moments to collect myself and looked up to the wall on the mother's side. The message was slightly different this time. It said, "One sees, one does not. Can you?" As I was staring at the message, a weak whisper proceeded to scare the living shit out of me. "Carter, is that you, honey?" My tears quickly returned. I walked over to her, grabbed her hand, and knelt down. "Yes, ma'am. It's me, Carter. What happened to you?" I said, trying my hardest not to sound like a blubbering child. She squeezed my hand hard and muttered, "Derek did this to us." Have you ever wondered if a person with no eyes could cry? If the tear ducts are still intact enough, tears can still flow. But without eyes, the tears just leak back into the eye sockets, unless the head was tilted forward and leaked out that way. Or it could come out of the nasal cavity. I wish it was as simple as that. She was obviously too weak to move, but shifted her head upward slightly. She had so much blood pulled up that when she started to cry, the blood-tear mixture spilled over and out of her eye sockets. Waterfalls of blood and tears pouring down her face, eventually covering our hands as it was leaking down her neck and arms. "He wouldn't stop rambling about the truth, and can we see it? My husband tried to reason with him, but that wasn't the reaction Derek was looking for." She resumed crying again. I tried to ask her where Derek went, but she just kept on crying. "We gotta help her! Please, can you guys do anything?" I said, looking over to John and Jane. "I'm sorry, Carter. Her wounds are too severe. It's a miracle that she's made it this long in the first place," Jane said, sounding like an unemotional nurse. "It's okay, honey. I told him I can see," Derek's mom said, sounding a little out of it. "What do you mean you can see? Please, miss, stay awake. I can get you help. We can find Derek and..." Derek's mom cut me off. "Carter, I've always loved you like a second son. I'm sorry for the way I acted towards you last night. I forgive you. Take care of Derek for me, would you, sweetie?" I started to break down more. "Wait, please. I've lost too much for you to go too." I started to look around for something, anything, to maybe stop the bleeding. But the more I searched, the more I realized I couldn't save her. She died still holding my hand 10 seconds later. After about a minute of silence, John and Jane managed to get me back into the car. John put his hand on my shoulder. "Come on, Carter. We need to find Derek before he hurts someone else. Then we can work on locating Johnny." He was right. We need to get Derek before he does something else, and we need to find Johnny. "I think I might know where he is," I said, feeling numb from the grief. When we were all kids, we had a treehouse that we'd all hang out in. It was our little escape from the world, and would get us through the most stressful days. Well, at least as stressful as it can get for a kid, like getting in an argument with our parents or being overwhelmed with schoolwork. Derek might be at our old treehouse, but we have to hurry. We got back to the car, and when I was about to tell them where to go, we were in front of the treehouse. It didn't even make sense how the car was able to get to the spot in the first place, because it was surrounded by trees and foliage that wouldn't allow a car to even fit. We always had to navigate our way and couldn't even bring a bike through. Nevertheless, the car was sitting under our treehouse. We made our way up to the tree and had to be extra careful not to slip, as the ladder planks that were nailed into the tree were soaked in blood. It looks like I was right about Derek coming here, I found Derek facing away from us, sitting crisscross and muttering to himself. There was a pile of eyes sitting next to him. 10 eyes, to be exact. I slowly approached my friend. Derek? Derek's head shot up, but didn't look at me. Carter! I was wondering when you'd show up. We need to save humanity, man. We are so blind. Now that you're here, we can make others see the truth, together. He sounded so delusional. Derek, what you're doing isn't saving them, man! You're murdering them! You killed your own fucking parents! You keep talking about how you can see, but you're blind to how wrong this all is! Derek chuckled. Right, wrong, life, death, it's all irrelevant in the grand scheme of things. I'm giving you one chance, Carter. Follow me and save humanity, or get out of my way and continue to be blind. John and Jane Doe stepped in at this point. No, Derek. We are giving you one chance to surrender and come with us peacefully. We can help you both. I have a message that humanity needs to understand. It's our next step to evolution. It's my mission. If you don't understand that, so be it. Jane stepped up to Derek to subdue him before anything escalated, but it was too late. Derek swung around to reveal an eyeless, bloody version of my friend, with a psychotic smile. He punched Jane in the head and she bursted through the treehouse, breaking through the window and flying into the darkness outside. John was already grabbing Derek's outstretched arm when Derek flung his head back and reverse headbutted him. John's nose bursted and black blood started to ooze out, but he showed no sign of pain. In an instant, John was in front of Derek and kneed him in his gut. This caused Derek to fly upward slightly, and before he could land, John brought his fists up and put them together, then slammed them down onto Derek's back. Derek hit the floor and the floorboard splintered with the impact. The treehouse was going to collapse on itself soon if this kept up. Derek growled and swept John's leg, but he caught himself with his hand and came back up. It looked like he did a cartwheel and someone pressed the rewind button. He kicked Derek in the side of the head, and by this point, Jane double front flipped back into the treehouse through the hole she crashed through earlier and landed on his back. Derek kept on trying to fling himself around, but they were both holding him down. Jane holding one arm and John holding the other, both of them pressing their knees into his back. John pulled this piece of shiny metal that was the size and shape of a credit card and placed it on Derek's wrist. The moment the metal made contact with Derek's skin, I saw it glow with intricate patterns, and it engulfed his whole hand. Jane then brought his other arm to it, and the glowing metal engulfed that too. Derek tried to pull his arms out of it, but every time he did, the markings would glow and small sparks of red electricity would spurt out and would make him scream in pain. The whole struggle went down in seconds. He eventually stopped trying to break free, and we got him into the car. Derek wouldn't stop freaking out unless we took the eyes with us too. Instead of fight it, we just complied to make it easier. John cleaned up his face, and Jane fixed her suit, and it seemed like they never even got into a reality-defying fight in the first place. I saved the "why do you have black blood" question for another time. Now that we have Derek, we need to get him into containment while we figure out where your friend Johnny is, Jane said while pressing on the gas pedal. We approached a strange-looking two-story building that was seemingly in the middle of nowhere. I had no idea how far we traveled, but I guess it doesn't matter. We made our way into the building, and it was eerily empty. John and Jane Doe escorted us to an elevator, and we started to descend. For a while. Once we were who knows how many floors down, the doors opened to a floor with many identical clear cells. Derek was placed into one, and the metal brace constraining him was removed by some robotic arm and placed into a tray that John grabbed it back from. The arm then placed a jar on a nightstand that was by Derek's new bed. The jar contained the eyes that Derek oh so needed. They were disinfected and placed into a type of preservation fluid to prevent decay. This seemed to soothe Derek for the time being, and they brought me back up to the surface level to discuss Johnny. John and Jane Doe had me wash up, then sat me down on a couch and gave me some coffee while they sat on an adjacent couch. John started speaking after a couple of long sips of his black coffee. The being you have encountered was brought upon by your pal James, and we are still working on exactly how he did that. You were all exposed to a type of energy that was not meant to be encountered. I cannot explain why the thing mentioned your fate, or called you guys by those strange names, but we do know one thing for certain. It took Johnny and James to a different place. We need to know the origin of the being to figure out exactly where. All right, well, how the hell are we supposed to do that? And will something happen to me? Jane looked over towards me. Simple, Carter. Deduce what you already know. It seems like from what you've told me that the thing has an infatuation with a black hole. Maybe we should start there. As for you changing, I think you're fine. Derek is like this because of the knowledge he was imbued with. You know what? That's what I was kind of thinking too, because that stupid talk is what sparked this whole fiasco. And yeah, that does make sense. What stupid talk? Jane and John said simultaneously. We got stoned and we were talking about the universe, and Derek asked what would happen if we survived a black hole. We stated what we thought about it, and that was that. I don't get how that stupid conversation started all of this, I said, recapping the events in my mind. Jane seemed interested. Well, go on. What were your theories? I said we'd probably get destroyed. Johnny was passed out, and James said it depends on what's on the other side. They stayed silent for a second before Jane spoke again. Curiosity can lead to unexpected things. This conversation was the seed of curiosity for James's mind. You are sure this conversation led to this encounter, right? I'm positive, ma'am. Then I think I might know where your friend is. Where would that be? John and Jane Doe both looked at each other, then back at me. He's on the other side. I've been thinking a lot about what they have told me. If what they say is true, then Johnny was taken through a fucking black hole. I have a strong feeling that the first readable page in James's journal might contain a clue regarding the location of it. It's just a feeling that I have, but I can't be sure. There could be countless black holes located in any part of our universe. John, Jane, and I are trying to figure out the location. Mainly them, though. I'm still not sure if I should hand over the page to them or not. I still want to keep the journal to myself for now. Maybe you people of Reddit can help me solve it, and I can give John and Jane a reason to think I'm not useless. I want to help, but I'm not sure if I can fully trust them. I still don't even understand their motives. Regardless, wish me luck. I will update you guys if we find the location or not. Thanks for your support. Part 5. I've cracked it! Thanks to some very helpful Redditors with a good eye and a sharp mind, and some of my own sleuthing, I was able to put the clues together, and I'm 99% sure I might have found the black hole. A couple of you have told me I should look into the constellation Virgo. I went back and analyzed the page to see if I could find anything else, and I think I did. I believe the shadow might have come from one of the galaxies in the galaxy cluster that's from the Virgo constellation. Specifically, I believe it's located in a faraway galaxy referred to as Messier 87. Coincidentally, this elliptical galaxy, like all others, has a massive black hole at its center. As you all know, my whole life has been altered due to a series of questions and the actions of the shadow. I found the ramblings of a madman and somehow gained the aid of a couple of unnatural agents named John and Jane Doe. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't doubt you for thinking I'm insane. For those of you that are caught up, I handed over the page to John and Jane Doe without letting them know about the whole journal. After they did a few tests, don't ask what they did as I'm just as much in the dark about that as you are, they seemed to be set on that particular galaxy. They said something about it being one of the brightest galaxies due to the energy output originating from the hole. I couldn't understand all of the little details, but they seemed very concerned by it. After some more deliberating with each other, they told me they have a way to get me to the other side. John looked over at me, giving me a look of worry that somehow expressed itself through his pitch-black sunglasses. Carter, this situation might be more serious than we originally thought. We believe we have the location of your friend, or at least the energy trace from the shadow. There's just two things. How bad is it? John and Jane simultaneously sighed and said, "The device we have can take you there, but there's no predicting where on the other side you'll go. Second, if we go, there's a great likelihood that we will be split up. The thing is, we know nothing of how it will be like once we get there." I needed a second to take in what they said. Try to realize the gravity of what they are asking of me. Would you willingly throw yourself into an unknown universe to save a real friend's life? Would you actually be willing to put your life on the line to other powers that are out of your control and understanding? Will it even work? Or ever find Johnny? Is he even alive? I'm sorry if I sound like I'm hesitating or making excuses, but can you really blame me? By John and Jane Doe's analysis, it means we potentially have a whole planet to blindly search in order to locate my friend. Even worse, there's a huge chance I'll have to survive in that said unknown planet, all by myself. I can barely imagine myself thriving in the middle of the ghetto in my own town, so how the fuck am I supposed to make a difference in a whole alternate world? I felt scared inside, an intense pit in the bottom of my stomach that felt like I was being squeezed and pulled to hell by Satan himself. There was just one thing that was overriding that fear and kept me planted where I was instead of running my ass out of that building when I had the chance. I felt rage. Rage from the fact that my life, friends, family, and my understanding of reality itself was taken from me. The fact that I now know I was just an insignificant piece of space dust that higher entities use for entertainment. Rage at how one conversation can change so many lives forever. Most of all, rage from the fact at how useless I felt about the whole thing. Useless. I have to make a change. Fuck it. Johnny would do the same thing for me. John and Jane, I'm ready. But before we go, we need to make a damn good survival plan for if we get split up. And I would like to have some words with Derek before our departure. John smirked. That a boy. Go talk to your friend and meet me up at level 2. Jane will take you to the containment ward. Jane and I made our way back down to the cell room, and this time I started to observe the floor for once. Probably from the fact I was now sober. Most of them were empty, and a couple of them looked used at some point. The intriguing part was that there were a few other cells that were occupied with other so-called subjects. I walked down the walkway that led to the cell doors and made my way to Derek's cell. I managed to get a look at the involuntary resident in a cell before his. The cell was different from the rest. It had a reinforced titanium-like door with a square observation hatch with a special type of glass on it. The cell was also the only one that wasn't see-through, because the rest of the cell was covered in the same type of metal, but with a darker blackish tint to it. I walked up to the window and peered inside. The room was slightly hard to see due to a mysterious grayish hazy mist that filled the room. When focusing on it, it seemed like there were even spores or some type of particle floating around in the mist too. It seemed extremely toxic. I saw a small shape in the very back of the cell, and I think it noticed my presence too, because it got up and took a couple of steps forward. The thing came into view, and I couldn't understand what I was looking at. The thing was the size of a small child, But that is where the similarities end. It was, or at least seemed, very skinny, with arms that went to its knees. Long, spindly fingers, with thin needle-like nails at the end. The nails slightly scraped to the floor from how elongated its arms and fingers were, and because of its hunched, rat-like posture. I said the thing was skinny, but I never said it looked malnourished. I couldn't tell if it had bones because I couldn't see any type of ribs or bone in areas a skinny person would show. The thing resembled something out of a child's drawing book, like one of those innocent drawings a kid would do and be proud of. But when you take a look at it, it's actually super unsettling or creepy. But you act nice anyways because it's a kid. This was a living version of that. Paper white skin with a smooth, slightly curvy noodle-like body, but still held up. It had a big head for its size and enormous eyes with pure black pupils with seemingly no iris. It was scary at how undetailed the bald head was. Eyes bigger than they should, a slight bump with no holes to breathe through as a nose, and a small, thin, black slit as a mouth. Even though the body shape seemed noodle-like and boneless, that did not mean it was muscleless. I would never in a million years go into the same room with that thing, even with my size advantage, and even if there was no weird mist stuff to worry about. This thing was ripped somehow. Starting from below the chest was a prominent 8-pack, and its breathing made its abs, arms, and shoulder area flex intensely with each slow breath. It looked like it could and would chase me down and rip me apart in a heartbeat. I knew it was intelligent though. I could see it in its creepy, curious, childlike gaze. It was observing me as if I was the one in a cell instead. It made me feel extremely uneasy with just a stare, but I could easily handle its image compared to the shadow encounter. The shadow was some alternate being beyond understanding. This thing, scary as fuck, yes, but at least it didn't mess up my mind and make my literal atoms feel weird. Then it found a way to make me freak out. It smiled at me. The slit of a mouth literally spread into a huge grin from ear to ear, which the thing did not have, revealing spinning, needle-like teeth that looked like it drilled into itself with every movement of its own mouth. The thing's eyes went completely jet black while everything I could see in the room started to decay and the floating particles started vibrating violently. I was staring in horror until I noticed the glass slightly crack. I was brought back to reality in an instant when Jane yanked me away. Did that glass just crack right now? That has never happened before. Come on, we need to go. Jane seemed like she was trying to avoid the glass situation more than Derek's cell. What was that thing? Please don't tell me those are the type of things we're gonna have to deal with on the other side. Jane gave in. Actually, this originated from Earth. That was Subject 18, nicknamed Toon, or Stickman. We contained him about 45 years ago, and knew about his origins for about 105 years. We have to do some maintenance on that cell. In all of the years we've had this thing, I've never seen the glass crack like that. These people get even stranger and stranger. John and Jane both seem like they were almost my age, maybe like 3 or 4 years older, not over a century. And Earth? We really know nothing about our own damn home. How does something like that even come into existence? You guys had that thing sitting in a cell for 45 years? You should have named it Needletooth. Or Drill Sergeant. I would have after all that time around that thing. Jane looked puzzled and stayed silent. You know, because when it smiles at you, the teeth, I said while pointing at my own teeth and making drilling motions. It smiled at you? doesn't smile. It never has before. I need to bring this to John's attention if you are correct. She took me by the arm and we started to make our way to Derek's cell. Good luck, Carter. I shot my head back to the direction of the Toon's door to see it standing upright, smirking at me through the small window. Next thing I know, I was at Derek's cell, watching him stare at his jar of eyes. It was very ironic how he did this with no eyes himself, but it seemed like he could see anyways. He even looked at me when talking, or turned to Jane when addressing her. It looked like he could draw too, noticing shapes of eyes etched into the wall by his bed. If I focused on it, I can see the small smears of blood on the etchings because he probably did them with his bare hands. Gonna find Johnny, huh? Derek said, holding the jar of eyes. Yeah, I'm gonna try, but there's a huge chance I'm not gonna make it back. Derek smirked. You are going to thrive, Carter. I don't know how Derek knew we were going to the black hole. He seemed to know a lot more than he should, and a lot more intelligent than the dumbass stoner I knew him as before. Yeah, I am going to the other side. How did you know? And what do you mean the other side needs me? I can see where you're going. I can see they need you. That's that. Good luck, Carter. Derek then winked at me, and I felt a chill go down my spine. All right, man. Whatever you say. I just wanted to say bye to you before we leave. Hopefully I can get us all the help we need to get everything back to normal. I can provide the help we all need. Carter, we both know our lives can never be normal anymore. I left Derek there, listening to his laughter slowly diminish as we ascended to level 2. Jane, Carter, I've got it all set up, and I have these. John was sitting at a desk with some computers and notebooks. Next to him were 2 backpacks on a table, and beside that was a machine that looked like it was stolen from aliens or something. It resembled 2 sideways teleporters from the video game Nazi Zombies on the map Der Rise, connected by a metal cylinder that was covered in similar markings as the piece of metal used to subdue Derek. It pulsed with energy, and the markings would glow a deep blue with each pulse. The shimmering almost put me in a trance, as I've never seen technology like this before in my life. John finished typing something into a terminal that was connected to a machine and walked over. All right, Carter. Our destination is Messier 87. Once we are on the other side, the program I installed into this machine right here should send us to the first planet with a survivable atmosphere. These packs right here are vital to our survival. Do not lose them by any means. You should be able to survive with it for months in almost any type of climate, if you know how. He gestured over to a futuristic machine. It's been calibrated. This is your last chance to walk out of here if you think this is too big for you to handle. I instantly looked at him and responded back. I'm going to the other side. Let's just get this shit over with. John smirked. All right then. Jane, you know what to do from here. Make sure we don't get zapped to some random universe, okay? Jane retorted back sarcastically. Sure, John. It's not like I'm the one who built the thing. Jane walked over to the terminal and started working on it while John put on a pack and tossed me the other. Aren't there supposed to be 3 packs? One for each of us? Jane is actually staying behind. She needs to control the machine and keep the facility safe while we're gone. 2 guys, 1 black hole. Man, that sounded wrong. Whatever, you know what I meant. I wish we all went there together, but John was right. Who was supposed to monitor Derek in the facility if it was just us 3? I picked up the pack and walked up to the machine with John. He pulled out a needle-like object that was sparking with the same color blue energy as the machine and pushed it into the center. The metal absorbed it, and John walked into the cylinder as an opening the perfect size of his body opened up from the metal. I followed suit, and after, we both got seated in a couple of seats that looked like they were designed for a sci-fi movie and buckled in. "All right, Jane, we're ready. Commence transport." Commenced. My ears rang as I tried to regain myself. I was so disoriented, I forgot where I was and what I was doing for about a good 5 seconds before my brain started to kickstart itself. My vision was double, and my head slightly hurt. I groggily looked over to see John still sitting in his seat like normal. Figures. "Ah, good, you're awake. We're about to enter the event horizon. You've been out for about 5 minutes, by the way." I looked outside to see one of the most terrifyingly beautiful things I, or anyone else for that matter, have ever experienced. Before me was an insane ray of energy bursting out of this void that I couldn't even see the end of because of how close, but simultaneously far it was at the same time. There were objects and light rays getting projected straight into the beam of energy, and everything was almost moving too fast for me to register. The light was almost blinding, but so intensely beautiful. The only reason our eyes didn't burn out is probably from whatever this craft is made of. It's like metal, but strangely has other properties like allowing us to pass or see through it. That beam of energy and radiation right there is a relativistic jet. That's our ticket in. What? John smirked, but kept his eyes planted on the black hole. "Get ready." In another instant, I felt some insanely intense pressure and watched everything stretch slightly as I was pushed into my seat with gravity. We were engulfed in a huge white flash of energy, and I fell unconscious once again. I knew I was in a different place the moment I regained my consciousness. I was still inside the spacecraft, but we definitely weren't in Kansas, or the Milky Way at all anymore. I looked up to the stars to see a bunch of weird shapes and energies throughout the skies. There were things that were way bigger than stars, and they straight up looked like CDs in space. As in, I could tell they were flat from the angles of certain discs. Flat earthers would be having a fucking blast right now. The sky was also covered in some strange web-like energy that swirled colors like dark crimson, neon green, and electric blue. The energy seemed to flow from the same anomaly in the sky that was hard for me to comprehend. The best way I can put it is like this. It looked like an inverse sun that had a twister coming out of it. Then imagine the twister branching out into thousands of strands that enveloped the sky itself like vines, encasing the planet we were on. If you were to see it from a space bird's eye view, it would look like the anomaly and the planet were trying to eat each other like parasites. The blackness of the sky also pulsed a blood red every now and then, and it scared me to my core every time it did. When it happens, it originates from somewhere else in space, so you can almost see the red wave coming. It was just too unnatural for me to not notice and get scared. It was so strange. In this place, you could view space better. It's hard to explain unless you have experienced it firsthand, but try to imagine everything more 3D looking, I guess. More depth perception that allows you to tell the distance and shapes of things more accurately. It's almost like a real-life video game. The area felt slightly warmer, but besides that, everything seemed survivable outside. Snapping me out of my amazement, John tossed me my pack. "All right, Carter, this is new territory for you and me. Pull out your rebreather. It should be in one of the pockets. The atmosphere here is undocumented, so we have zero idea of the toxicity or survivability of the air." I pulled out a mask that reminded me of those types of face masks that characters like Scorpion from Mortal Kombat wore. Just more jet black, and when I put it on, it molded to the shape of my face. After it did that, it looked like if Kakashi Hatake from Naruto had a super futuristic mask and gave it to me. I looked through the rest of the pack to see some interesting things. First, there were some basic survival gear like water, MREs, water purifier, combat knife, how-to books, etc. When I dug deeper in the pack is where I found some cool things. Some of the stuff I couldn't even tell what the use was for, while I could recognize the simpler things. I pulled out some type of clothing, a pistol, and a couple pieces of strange metal tech. Yes, put those clothes on as well. They are designed to adapt to whatever this environment ends up being like. As for the gun, you're more than qualified to use it without training. If you've ever played airsoft, paintball, or laser tag, you're more than capable of utilizing this. One more important thing. The mag contains 12 special rounds that will regenerate themselves back. 30 minutes each, so 12 rounds equals 6 hours. They are highly powerful as well, so only use it as a last resort. And use them wisely, as you do not want to be stuck waiting for a round to recharge in a real situation. The clothes we brought along were these weird black cloth-like material strips that melded with my body shape and kind of looked like robes and ranger armor at the same time. The material felt durable even though it looked thin. It also started to keep me at a comfortable temperature as I noticed the warmth I felt earlier going away. Very strange. There was also a black poncho with a hood we put on over our clothes that was made for weather conditions. I took the knife and the gun out of the pack and holstered them in slots that were conveniently placed in spots my hands naturally gravitated towards. Once all readied up, I had to admit, I felt like a badass. I was standing there looking like a Spec Ops space version of a scout from Attack on Titan. Too bad not one soul will believe me. John touched the side of the machine and the needle key came out. John grabbed it and we walked out of the craft, straight into the new universe. I looked at the scene before me in awe. The dirt was blue and the grass was purple. The night sky was so foreign and clear. The trees were jet black with rainbow-colored leaves, and I saw different flowers and shrubs I never even would have thought could exist. Flowers with patterns like spirals or geometric shapes. I went to examine a flower that looked like a blood-red sunflower with black seeds, and it hissed at me when I got too close. Definitely not gonna try that again. I was taking in the beauty of the new world as John looked at a holographic screen that came from a band on his wrist. All right, there seems to be an energy surge emanating from those woods over there. I think we should start by checking that out. I thought John was talking about the black-barked rainbow trees, but when I looked over to where he was pointing at, the section of trees changed. We were in a clearing surrounded by trees and plants. Most of the trees surrounding us were those rainbow trees, but the part John pointed at was different. The area resembled more of a giant bamboo forest of concrete columns that I couldn't see the end of. It just stretched into the sky until it just disappeared into the void above. They were trees though, as I saw a piece of one of the strange columns and it contained rings like a normal tree. And every now and then, I would see a couple of small branches with a couple of black leaves on it as well. The whole area was covered in a foggy mist. My brain screamed, "Fuck that!" But I agreed nevertheless. I felt the air around me get cooler the moment we entered the mist, even with the temperature moderation. That means, if I was just standing here normally, I probably would have started to freeze to death in the mist. This was some damn good technology. I watched a leaf crumble into icy flakes when I touched it. We continued inwards, in about 5 minutes of walking, and I felt like we were lost. Everything looked identical from every direction. I looked up to see the mist concealed the skies as well. Damn, that was scary. Imagine looking up to see literally thousands of column, tree, bamboo things jut out of the ground and disappear into the white, misty unknown. Every direction looking exactly the same. That was my reality at the moment. Man, I hope we find something important in here. I want to get the fuck back to the craft, I said, feeling my anxiety slowly build up. This place was too quiet. Not one sign of life at all. No rustling or wind brushing against nature. Just cold, dry silence. Don't worry, Carter. I feel the same way. While we're here, we might as well take some samples of everything to take back and analyze later. We are making first contact after all. Sounds good, John. Just please don't walk away. I do not want to get lost in here. Gotcha. Just holler if you start to lose sight. But we should be close at all times. John started taking samples of the soil and inspecting some plants in the grass while I looked around for something to take a sample of. I took out the combat knife and decided I was going to cut a piece of fresh tree bark. I started to make an incision, and a black liquid slowly dribbled out. I touched it with my gloved fingers and noticed I could still feel things through the strange material. The substance felt like slightly runny sap. I finished my incisions and put a small square of bark away, then proceeded to fill a vial with the black sap. I turned around to give John the samples when I witnessed something that would make anyone with a sane mind never want to go outside again. John was kneeling down with a few different samples of soil and plants next to him. This was normal. The Mickey Mouse gloved hand that was unnaturally stretching from a black arm that was behind one of the column trees. Not fucking normal. "John!" I screamed. He glanced up and raised his eyebrows. He had barely had time to look at it before I watched it stretch forward and yank John away. Just like a fucking cartoon, straight into the whiteness that surrounded me. The thing was so fast. I thought John was fast. I had the gun in my hand in split seconds, and I pointed it in every direction around me, not knowing where another gloved hand could pop out. "Fuck! Fuck!" I screamed, my panic and anxiety hitting the breaking point. I'm fucking alone. I knew this was going to be a suicide mission. If John didn't even stand a chance, how am I? There was no sound at all when it snatched John. I threw the samples into the small bag that John brought along and slung it on my back, while I kept the pistol pointed in different directions. I was searching frantically for something, just knowing this thing was trying to sneak up on me too. I was almost too late. I stood there, and in my peripheral vision, I noticed something fly in the opposite direction. I took a chance and stood there for a second more. Taking in a breath and telling myself, fuck it, I swung my arm around and blindly shot the pistol to where I wasn't looking and flinched, not knowing if I was going to get snatched or not. My ears were greeted with a loud laser-like boom and then a crack. I swung my head in the direction of the shot, and I saw the Mickey Mouse glove explode, yellow liquid bleeding out of the black arm, and a high-pitched that sounded like a fucking cartoon from the 1930s. A huge chill instantly flew down my spine the instant my ears registered that yelp. I think I just discovered something that will mentally scar me, far worse than any evil clown can. I really didn't want to know what it looked like, or if there were more things in the mist just like it. I started sprinting, not caring or even knowing at all in which direction it was. I was in survival mode. My gunshot seemed to finally break the silence, as now I heard creepy giggles every now and then while I sprinted through the column trees. Some sounded low, some sounded high, some were female, some were male. Every single one sounded menacing and obliviously joyful at the same time as well. They came from all around me as I ran. I saw another shape, and I shot randomly behind me about another 3 or 4 times in different spots to keep things at bay, and it seemed to work for a moment. I heard another disturbingly giddy voice in the distance.
Golly, that one almost got me!
I knew I couldn't keep this up for long. I knew I had at least 6 shots that I needed to be smart with, but I had no idea where to go or what to even do. Whatever these things were, their intentions were obviously not good, and it seemed like they were taking pleasure from this as well. I continued to sprint and sprint until my clumsiness almost ruined me once again. I tripped over a root and slammed into one of the pillar trees. It threw me off balance, but I didn't fall over. I kept going, and I saw a shape of a building start to form in the distance. I managed to blow up another hand with 2 more shots as I made my way to the unknown structure. Once close enough, it looked exactly like a building would look on Earth, just slight differences in the style. I looked at the top of the building to barely make out the words, Will Fleischer Studios. I ran up to the door and thanked the twisted god watching over me as the door was unlocked. I slammed the door behind me and caught my breath while locking it. After a couple of seconds to catch my bearings, I listened to the laughs and giggles grow fainter, until it was dead silence again. I looked around the room I was in to see that I was in some type of lobby. It seemed like I was the first person to step in here for years, as everything had a layer of dust and seemed to be stuck in time. I cleared the room and made sure I was alone. I'll explore the rest of the building later. Right now, I'm mentally and physically exhausted. I need some time to process these events and figure out what the fuck I'm supposed to do. One other thing I just realized is, I have no idea if this update is even going to post. I'm in a different dimension, so I doubt it. All I can do is try though, as nobody probably ever had the chance to even do so. If it does, it would be amazing, and we would both play a part in history. If not, this is still a good way to retain my sanity. I will update this either way. Thank you to everyone still around. And I will update when given the next good chance. Thanks. And wish me luck. Carter Lux.
Hey sci-fi horror fans, it's Jordan. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you to all our official members of the channel. Your support means a lot to us. Craving another scary tale? Click on that video on your screen. Until next time, everyone, and remember, stay cosmic.